Welcome to 21st Century Saints, our podcast and live stream series for members and those affiliated with or adjacent to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints here in the United Kingdom and
around the world.
Around the world. I'm your host, Jane Christie, and my co-host for this evening, I mean, we're all friends by now, right? But let's just reintroduce ourselves. Alana Wilson-Bryce, you want to say hey?
Hi everybody, hope you're all well this fine Wednesday evening or daytime, wherever you are.
Exactly, and we have Queen Sarah Elizabeth right here with us. Do you want to say hey?
Hi everyone, hope everybody's doing okay this evening and you're looking forward to a night at the movies with us guys. Get the popcorn ready, you won't have time to eat it because it's going to be too exciting, but get ready.
I am so ready for this. So, do you know what? I'm not going to because I think everybody gets at this point where, you know, who we are. We're your 21st century hosts that are going to take you through this journey. Before we begin tonight, a couple of things that we just want to say. First of all, donors, how can we ever thank you? You have allowed us to do so much with your donations. I cannot thank you enough. The donations have allowed us to build a website, have allowed us to take the safeguarding work that we're doing and put it in the hands of the people who can make decisions. The donations have allowed us to be able to just keep broadcasting. And I got to say for you know, Sarah, who's retired, Alana, who's an independent parent, pulling double duty as you know, on her own with her incredible daughter, and for me, who's at home, who can't leave because you know I'm looking after my disabled son, to be able to see how you value our work. It's huge. I cannot thank you enough. We do want to ask again, if you can contribute, we would greatly appreciate that. So while we have been able to do a lot, as you can see tonight, we're a little bit more rough and ready. We have had some massive technical problems to the point where our Alana was just absolutely heartbroken this week. Do you want to share your pain?
So my see what I mean? My laptop stopped working. I sent it to a lovely lady to fix it, and I've been told it's not fixable. So I'm coming live to you from my iPad. So
thank you, Steve Jobs.
That's how it stands. So it was a bit problematic, but I'm here. It might not be the best lighting, the best camera, and you'll probably see me moving a lot because I keep getting out the camera.
We are getting a little bit of audio flutter again, Alana. So what I'll do is if it starts to happen again, so we were kind of messing about with this earlier, and because the technology isn't quite what Alana's used to using, we're still figuring this stuff out. So if Alana needs to head out,
problematic, just knock me off and I'll just do the chat and stuff. So
well, yeah, we're definitely getting the little beat, but we'll see how we go through the show. It's so great to have Alana here anyway, because she just contributes so much, and it's been a really, really rough week. So thank you for hanging in there. And thank you to the technology people who are just bringing us all together to make it work. So we love you. If you can do anything to help, if you we know that it's really tough just now for people to be able to contribute at all. We understand how difficult it is. So if you can even share this episode with someone that you think may benefit from it, or if you could even subscribe, hit the like button, any of those things, all of those things are so helpful to get this episode and our work to the places it needs to go. We talk about really serious stuff, but we're going to get serious tonight, but we're also going to have fun tonight. So yeah, we've all figured out. What else? Website. If you can, please share our website wherever you can. You can find the website at 21stcenturysaints.org. All of the information is there. If you can go into the chat just now, you'll see ways to donate. You can also donate to us via the website. Now, on our website, we have we are pulling together all of the work that we're doing. It's still being built. It's still being added to. We are working nonstop on this stuff. It's awesome. But you can see not only previous episodes, you can also see template letters if you would like to use them to inspire you to contact your ward or stake leaders, any elected representatives. If you're not a member of the church, if you want to use these templates to contact the church as a member of the community, asking for safeguarding measures to be implemented in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints now. We also have an open letter where you can, if you like, add your name to the wonderful cast of people who have co-signed. So we have the wonderful Radio Free Mormon, Lindsay Hansen Park, Bill Reel, Nemo the Mormon, Priesthood Dispatches, all of those guys, the wonderful Natasha Helfer Parker, are so many incredible people. If you'd like to add your name, there's a form you can contact us on our website. And finally, we have the petition. If you could share the petition, sign the petition, go just check out the petition and tell us what you think, add your name. There are so many ways to get involved with the work that we are doing. And please let us know what kind of results you get. That is super important to us. We can tell you that people are listening, and we're really excited to tell you more about that this week. So with that, let's head to the movies. Get comfortable, sit back, and let's talk. I'm going to kick off with throwing our guys here a curveball. Mormon movies, traditionally the ones that I was exposed to, keeping in mind I'm a convert to the church, there were a lot of Mormon movies that people were aware of in the church that I had never watched. So I'm thinking about Johnny Lingo.
Johnny
I love that
Lingo.
little in a sigh. Cipher in the Snow. Do we?
Yeah.
I'm seeing eye rolling. Okay.
Man's Search for Happiness.
Man's Search for
Happiness. If we really go back some time, let's get a hold of all of these.
Yeah. So and let's face it, at the time they would have probably been quite, like a really good production standards and things. Cipher in the Snow just really depressed the hell out of me. That was a bit of a weird one, and it wasn't necessarily here's Mormonism. It was just this sort of cautionary tale. But we started to get better. We started to get so the more kind of recent ones, I'm thinking, did any of you guys watch what is it called? The Other Side of Heaven?
Yeah.
Okay. So that had Anne Hathaway? Yeah.
I think
yeah.
Anyway,
we've got some cast.
A lot of years ago, that wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, now that's the scary thing. It feels like yesterday, but yeah, apparently it was a million years ago. Singles Ward.
Singles Ward. Okay,
the classic, The Best 2 Years.
Best 2 years, yeah.
Yeah, Alana's nodding in the background. Did you have a favourite song from the soundtrack, Alana? I feel like that would have emotionally resonated with you. In fact, now I don't even care if you crackle here at this point. I just need an answer to this question. When we were having a clear out of Alana's the recesses of Alana's cupboards at this time last year, I feel like we found the Best 2 Year soundtrack. I feel like you had that in your CDs. Yeah.
But it's been so long since I've listened to it. The best 2 years, the best 2 years.
And speaking of soundtracks,
Baptists at the barbecue.
But I can't even say I was so excited. Yes. Okay, Alana, Sons of Provo. If you sing it and we get copyrighted, by the way, this is on, because I feel in your soul that you are yeah. It's Alana sings, and Alana sings very, very well. And this is the soundtrack of Alana's childhood. So I'm just enjoying just watching the recollections coming back. What else? Isn't there another soundtrack one? I'm maybe thinking about the Sons of Provo, but Saturday's Warrior.
Saturday's Warriors.
I have not seen it. Like, I know I could give you a list of these, no bother, but I haven't seen it. Was that? Is it good? Not.
I can't
you
remember
read-
anything
okay.
about it. I can't
So-
remember the title, but cannot remember anything about
So
it.
that's how memorable it is.
Yeah, you know, it made such an impression.
Wasn't it Her Holiness Carolyn Pearson who wrote that, right? So I mean, it's got to have something going for it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't
well,
remember that.
if I'm wrong,
Okay.
I'm wrong. Some, the
Yeah, well,
I
real
just
author.
Yes.
Yes.
Googled the Sons of Provo songs because I just couldn't remember them, and I knew as soon as I seen them. I think my favourite one was "Dang Fetch, oh my heck, what the holy's crud." H-E-double.
You remember you
Oh,
singing that?
the Mormon swear word one. I think that was my favourite.
Okay, and if
Oh,
that
brilliant.
has been enough to have us not just copyrighted, but also enough to have an explicit language
it's
warning.
Okay. They're all too busy. The legal department's all too busy looking through all our stuff, Jane. They ain't got time for this. They're too busy. They've had too many documents on us that they're going through.
So right,
They're too busy.
Let me make this super clear, audience. We are going to get into the dirty stuff here. We've got some specifics we want to talk about. We're not just rhyming off a list of movies, but it is the worst offence to God and man to give spoilers. I do not do it. It is inhuman and ungodly. So I will.
Yeah, Jane, just to be clear, Jane will send you to outer darkness and wash the dust off her feet after communicating with you if you give her a spoiler alert.
Absolutely. It is
You
not
will wash
okay.
the dust from your feet and outer darkness.
I expect a talk in general conference. In fact, if I gave a talk in general conference, that would be the one. That's how important it is. But unless it is pivotal information that we need to get. Okay, I'm just saying I will be torn if that has to happen. But Queen Sarah, that was a spoiler alert. We will talk about this later on at some point in a couple of weeks.
Am I going to outer darkness?
No, it was an okay
sorry.
spoiler alert because
okay.
we are keeping the lawyers very, very busy.
We are actually they have, and it's not just the lawyers in this country. They've now told us that it's all our stuff has gone to the central lawyer team. So we're keeping the lawyers very busy. So evening lawyers, evening anyone else who might be listening.
Love you.
We love you. We love you. You're
all
fantastic. I've loved the conversations I've had with you on the phone. They've been intelligent. They've been articulate. We've loved the conversations.
Yeah.
And enjoy our documents. We're looking forward to feedback. We hope we don't have to wait much longer because there's 3 of us and there's like hundreds of you and you all get paid to do it and we don't. So we're kind of rather hoping you might speed yourselves up a little bit here, lawyers, if you can just crack on with it, because we're well aware that the area presidency can't make a decision or do anything until the lawyers that lead the church have told them what to do. So we would appreciate it if you could get a little bit of speed going here, please. We would appreciate it. Because actually, I say that almost in jest, but actually, there's a very serious tone to me saying, can you get a bit of speed on here? Because all the time that you're sitting going through our documents where we're just asking you to safeguard children, it means children aren't being safeguarded.
Alana,
so if you can stop telling us that everything we write and everything we say is being passed to the lawyers for scrutiny and crack on and do something, we would appreciate it. And even more so would the children appreciate it.
Absolutely. Alana, would you like to reframe that in your beautiful, succinct way about how we would appreciate the law? Sarah just put it really beautifully, like, if you could find time in your busy schedule, that you get paid to complete, could you maybe do some work? Do you want to put it a bit more bluntly?
Go
for it a lot.
Sort it. It's not hard.
It isn't hard. We're doing, like, we're providing all of the stuff that you need. We are showing you what to do.
We've done the work. We've done the work. We've spent hours putting all these documents together that they're now pulling apart. And I'm thinking,
you know what?
Crack on. We don't have lawyers sitting side by side with us, helping us write it and helping us tell them what the laws are they need to pay attention to and giving them the references and the statutes and the instruments. We're just come on, crack on. Us 3 women here can do it. You guys can do it. How many of them are there? I hate to think. How much tithing money this is costing,
They've
actually.
got secretaries to do stuff for them.
They have secretaries. How much tithing money is being spent at this moment in time by lawyers reading our documents?
Yep.
We're
keeping,
go
keeping the
for it,
wheels
Alana.
of industry turning. So, but this is why. So this is why we need a night off to go to the movies and reminisce about the old ones. Okay, I am gonna before we talk about the specific shows that we promised we were going to follow up about tonight. How about, did anybody get to see Forever Strong? Did any of you both get? I loved it.
That sounds familiar. What was it about? Because it sounds.
So
I like the title.
It was featuring rugby, actual rugby.
Oh, that's good. That's a good start.
Coach Larry Gelwicks. So it was based on true life, and it was really good.
Can I just check? Was this rugby, not American football?
Correct. Actual rugby.
The real game. Brilliant.
Real rugby.
That's a good start.
I think we get a little glimpse of a game with. I might have just made that up. No, you know what? Never mind. Doesn't matter. Oh, there is the middle finger is raised at some point during it, and that's what gave it that apparently
in a Mormon video. In a Mormon video,
it's not like
that's
Mormon. It's made by the same team who did Saints and Soldiers. So it's
Mormon,
that
was another one.
Yeah, not Mormon, but yeah, I really liked that, and because the certificate wasn't, what would we call it here, PG?
You know, I watched Single Sword at the Dollar Movies in Provo when I went to America for a couple of weeks with a friend.
Okay, yeah. Well, you know what? We've got no time to sit and watch movies because we've done it all. Now we're ready to discuss movies. Okay.
We are.
So, with the best will in the world, with very few, maybe one notable exception, they are kind of shallow. They, you know, I was having a chuckle when I was looking at, you know, what are the most popular Mormon-based movies of all time, and they present a very binary view of good and bad, and things are not really super complicated in it. So when it was sort of showing what the best Mormon movies, Emma Smith, My Story, was mentioned in this, and I'm like, that's not a movie. That was a church. So it goes along hand with Joseph Smith, Prophet of the Restoration, that was shown, and you know that everybody was really encouraged to watch, was being used. All those clips still get used, and so her story went hand in hand with that. That, I'm sorry, that doesn't count. If that's the best you can come up with, I mean, it's so. I have a drama background, and I teach. I used to teach a long time ago. I hate emotional manipulation, and you know, whenever you have this moment of and it happens in pageants where like the actor is like looking up, and there is Jesus, and the lighting and the music and it's just all very contrived, and I don't like it. There's no complexity. There's no sort of character journey. I don't know. There's not really the kind of thing that I'm looking for in real actual drama. So then we get propelled into the world of Mormon drama, because it's not necessary. It's not been made really for the church or by the church. That does well. Meet the Mormons became a bit of a thing, which was I'm trying not to call it propaganda, right? But it's very much.
It was produced with that end in mind, though, wasn't it? It was produced. It was actually produced when everybody was asked to kind of share it, watch it, show it, be involved in it, because it was meant to be the hugest bit of publicity for the church that they had ever done up to that time.
See,
So
can I tell
propaganda,
you?
publicity, just whichever, but that's
Let
what
me
it
tell
was,
you
wasn't it?
my reasoning why I am really not keen on on this whole thing, and I might be super unfair here, but I don't know if an American audience necessarily gets this, and I might be way overreaching, but my perspective on this is in the UK there was a super really well done documentary. It came out on Channel 4. It was very accessible, and it was called Meet the Mormons.
Yeah.
And this documentary film crew are following a young missionary going to the MTC, and it shows what his journey is like from mission prep to going on his mission. And the church had agreed to all of this filming, and my understanding is that at some point during the filming, the filmmakers can see, oh, this is a different story than the one that we had expected to show, because it's complex. Obviously, a young missionary who's going to go out into the field is going to have complicated feelings, and times whenever, am I doing the right thing? And leading the audience to ask questions like, are you being forced to serve a mission? Totally reasonable questions that people do ask.
And I think that was on the back of the young lad became so distressed when he was in the MTC. He was really struggling, and he was having anxiety attacks and finding it really difficult to cope in the MTC. And his MTC president, which is a bit scary, was kind of providing counselling for him and teaching him ways to calm his mind. And it was all a bit scary, because you're thinking, get the lad a proper counsellor and therapist, will you please? Because he's clearly not coping. And then
there were these wonderful moments in it, though, that had this family dynamic where the family are talking about LGBTQ issues, the parents had one concrete sort of traditional view, and the younger kids were saying, well, no, I don't really agree with that. And it was brilliant, like how healthy. However, then what happened, because I think the church were a bit disappointed, and then and again, this is my perspective, within a matter of months produce Meet the Mormons, the exact same title, but this time we're meeting real life people from all over the world. And it was just, here's spoonfuls of sugar and happy ever afters, and I mean real stories, but emotionally manipulative. And I say that as someone who did an I'm a Mormon profile. I think some great work was done in some of those profiles. These were people's actual real life things that they had really struggled with, but often when it's cut down to a few minutes long, I mean, it's just, it's a bit, it's not really what I'm looking for, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I think the thing that hugely struck me about the one that Channel 4 did on Meet the Mormons was when the family was so adamant that their sons were going to say that they believed everything the church taught. And they were adamant with the cameramen that, they will agree with the church stance on LGBT. Yes, of course our sons will. And when the sons were asked, they were like, no, the heck we don't. We don't agree with it, and I don't like it, and I'm really struggling with it. And the parents were a bit like, whoa, they dealt with it really well, and it was really good that they dealt with it. But the parents were kind of taken a bit aback. They were a bit surprised, and you could almost see the shockwaves of, hang on, this is going to be on national TV. You could kind of almost feel the shockwaves going around with that one. But it was really powerful.
Most shocking or the most sort of disturbing part was, I feel so bad, because these are lovely people. It's not even that. It was the thing that people kept talking to me about was, what is with the guys in suits that are following him around looking super sinister. And even though these are, in Britain, Mormonism is so small, everyone knows everyone else, and these are wonderful guys. But oh my goodness, we looked creepy. It was just weird.
There is something extraordinarily creepy about two guys that 24/7 are by each other's side, to the extent that even if they have a 2-bedroom flat, they have to share the bedroom. that are 24/7 by each other's side, and they're kind of, although things are getting better slightly in what they're wearing now, but we're always in very dark suits and white shirts and dark ties. And it did look, it was a bit of a kind of creepy, sinister look.
I don't know if you'll remember, because it's actually the church leadership, what was it, the church, what do we call it, the PR department. So what's his name? He had his own I'm a Mormon profile, and it was really lovely, showing his background in the police, and it was lovely. And what was being presented was this total weirdo. This total weirdo. You're like, yeah. So you see an I'm a Mormon video where this lovely, thoughtful, even his story is quite dramatic, actually. And now you're being presented just standing in corners or doorways in a suit, and people are like, what is happening, and what's with the suits, and what?
Do you think there's any coincidence in why the church, not long after the Channel 4 series called Meet the Mormons, do you think there's any coincidence in why the church chose to use their biggest propaganda ever? I think that's why they used the same title. Do you think that in the hopes that would get to the top of the algorithms, whatever they're called, and people would start going there instead of to the Channel 4 one?
Based on absolutely no information whatsoever. I 100% believe that to be the case.
Yeah.
To the point where I think if our audience, we're going to try and put a link to this in the show notes.
Actually, just Google it now.
Great documentary, but when you Google it,
I'm just about to.
Up was the.
I have to try this.
Let's fact check as we go.
Let's fact check as we go.
We haven't even started our Netflix stuff. So tell me, guys, both of you, do you have a preference for
top link that's come out? Meet the Mormons 2014 film.
Yep,
top of the list.
Okay, we will pop the information in the show notes. Right, what would you like to talk about first? Mormon fundamentalism or Mormon radicalization? Where will we go first? I'm thinking should we
so linked.
Shall we do You're so linked. Shall we talk about Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey first? Shall we do that first?
Yes, let's do that one.
Which is, of all of the things that we've spoken about in the previous episode and this one tonight, just in case, let's do a trigger warning just now, because the trigger warning that is before the actual documentary, for anyone who's watched Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, that trigger warning is not sufficient. Nowhere near sufficient. That is the most common feedback, is that what you are presented with in this true story, this true documentary, it's what is it? What do we call it? The sort of true crime genre. These are real things that we're hearing. And people were so disturbed by it. Rightly so. So tell me what you're thinking. This was the story of Warren Jeffs. It leads us, what's a Mormon community supposed to do with this? My question is fundamentalism, they're the bad guys, right?
I think what we have to do as a church is absolutely recognise that there is such a link between fundamentalism and radicalisation and extremism. And we need to understand that the fundamentalist approach and that people have taken to the literal translation of everything in scripture and the literal translation of the early teachings of Brigham Young, particularly, because that's where the fundamentalist, most of the stuff is kind of from there, then I think we need to really recognise that it's not that difficult for a righteous, good living Mormon to actually become tipped over with radicalisation and extremism and get themselves tipped over into being really drawn into the fundamentalist lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that's the scary bit about it is, hang on, at one point these guys were kind of living what we would call a righteous life. They were following the commandments. They were doing things the way they'd been taught. They kind of had Christ, God as the centre. And then before you know it, they've increasingly become more and more and more radicalised and more extreme.
Alana, can you tell me what do you, the fundamentalist Mormons, how did you understand that growing up whenever someone would, that would be, I suppose, the answer to why people in our church at the moment are very uncomfortable with the idea. They are not Mormons, right?
Obviously, I didn't have a big knowledge of all this growing up. I'd seen little bits. I'd seen documentaries on the polygamous side of things. I can't remember. I can picture the guy's face in the programme and everything. I didn't have a huge knowledge of it, to be honest, growing up. But yeah, anything that wasn't directly related with the church that I belonged to they don't belong to a church. But now, obviously, being older, I realise, and having watched Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, it's like, but it stemmed from the Mormon Church. They started off in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and through, like, you were saying, Sarah, through these beliefs and teachings and it becoming more extreme for them, that's where they then became that side of it. So I think people need to understand that, they're not directly the Church of Jesus Christ as we stand today, but it does derive from the beginnings of that. Like, that's where that began. So I think people have got to realise that, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I feel like I'm trying to say, like, just have a bit more understanding. Now, obviously, some of the behaviours, like, I find Keep Sweet, Pray Obey very, very difficult to watch.
Alana, can I jump in before you go there to ask a specific question? Did you, growing up, know the difference between FLDS, RLDS? Right, okay.
No, I probably didn't even really know that they existed, to be honest, until just a few years ago, being honest. Okay. May have been mentioned to me, and I've forgotten, but I don't have any recollection
that's
never knowing that sense. Growing up.
And they're not good guys, right? Are they Mormon?
Well, according to the members of the church that I speak to, they're nothing to do with their church. That's what I was told. These people are nothing to do with their church, and I've probably said that. Oh, but they're break-offs from our church. They're nothing to do with us. But I now do that slightly differently.
Yeah, that's exactly how it gets.
They were at one time to do with us.
When the story
from the beginnings of Mormonism.
When the story of Warren Jeffs and his crimes broke, the church leadership, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, very, very clearly, because we're talking about Mormonism in its broad terms, we have the same parents, we have the same roots, really, we have a shared history. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints used the term that it is misleading and inaccurate to associate the FLDS with Mormonism, with the existing church. Thoughts, ladies?
The difficulty is an awful lot of what the FLDS were doing and what the fundamentalists were doing in Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, an awful lot of what they were doing we can trace back to things that Joseph Smith was doing. Marrying other men's wives, marrying 14-year-old, marrying multiple women. We can trace it right back to the Prophet of the Restoration's behaviour at one point in time.
Well, so let me ask you this, because I think, you are exactly right. I completely agree. Thinking about how mainstream Latter-day Saints are going to process this information, which is horrific, it makes us want to look away, right? And to bring in Joseph Smith parallels, I think, is really genius, because I think what's really important to know is, the story of Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, it hasn't finished today. He is still the leader of the FLDS church, and quite simply, if you were to ask members who are, people who are members of the FLDS church, while some have left the religion over the years, for people are still practicing that faith. People who are still practicing do not believe that he did what he's accused of doing.
Let me give you an example of something that happened many years ago, 20, 25, 30 years ago for me. My kids all left the church as teenagers. They're all in their 40s now. They all left the church as teenagers, so a long time ago. 25 years ago, my eldest daughter bought me a book. about Brigham Young and polygamy. And she said, I think you need to read this book. And I said, but it's not true. I said, that book's not true, Ruth. I said, no. I said, that's anti-Mormon stuff. It's not true. I said, all this stuff about polygamy, all this stuff about Joseph Smith and polygamy, no. I said, I've never heard of it. It's not right. And she said, read the book, Mum. And that book stayed on my bookshelf for donkey's years, unread. And I was really concerned that she kind of had found this book and wanted me to read it. And that is to the extent of was like, anything like that was just so uncomfortable. I couldn't go near it because I just thought, but it's not right. Joseph Smith didn't practice polygamy. And so there was absolutely, in my head, there was no way he had practiced polygamy. I had all these kind of weird, distorted views and beliefs about it. And I think that level of being extremely uncomfortable with anything, particularly when you point out that there are parallels between the fundamentalists and things that were happening in the early church. And that's where the fundamentalists got it from.
Yeah.
It's just, hey, let's get back to the fundamentals that were happening in the beginning of this church and let's start doing those because you've all got away from them. And that's the way their take on it is you've moved away from how things were done in the early days. We need to get back to that.
Alana, can you speak to that? Because I recall you telling me that was what your... It was so interesting to me that your reaction as we were chatting about this this documentary, I was really trying to prepare you for what you were going to hear, and that I'm so conscious that my friend here is a survivor. This is traumatic for anyone to hear, but particularly, you know, with your personal experiences, it might be really re-traumatizing and things like that. And while that was, you know, that was clearly upsetting, what you had spoken about was what Sarah was talking about. You could see the parallels with Joseph Smith. Would you maybe... It just interests me. Would you share a little bit about how you can see it?
Things that I've said, and I have got no clue what she's talking about.
Everyone
to say, and then it's gone.
It's all up here.
Well,
just in case the lawyers need to know what's up.
I just think, obviously, so going back to what I knew, like obviously, I grew up hearing wee bits about Joseph Smith, and polygamy and things, but obviously, I was always told, you know, that that was just the times then. Things are different now. You know, we don't practice it. You know, I'd hear wee whispers of marrying young girls, and again, I was told, but that was just the times, that was the kind of age they were married at. And I think I must have blocked that out for a long time, because when I heard again about Joseph Smith marrying 14-year-old girls and things, it was like I was traumatized all over again, and like angry and sad, and I think I almost had forgotten that I'd heard whispers of this as a teenager or whatever, and it was like I was hearing it for the first time all over again. And it just ripped me apart, because I just think, you know, how can people be okay with saying that was just the times, you know? And obviously, upon having discussions with Jane, I now realise that that's just an excuse, that's a load of nonsense that people spout. Because Jane, I don't know if you can remember, I remember you telling me something about the kind of average, like around those times of marriage and things, you know, and it wasn't 14-year-old girls.
And they weren't marrying 40-year-old men and 50-year-old men, 60-year-old men.
So yeah, basically it's seeing that from back in those times to then watching this and seeing similar things happening to all these young girls who are being forced into marriages that they otherwise don't want to be in, and having to have sexual encounters with men that they don't want to have to. It was really, it just all came together, and I just thought, you know,
can I speculate?
It's nothing to do with it, but really it is.
Well, you see, I just to sort of, you know, speaking to the victim side of things, you know, the survivor side of things, you know, forgive my word choice. The fact that you are more reactive to what the parallels that you are drawing between the church's origins, rather than this really awful traumatic thing that happened to you, it makes me sort of wonder, you've heard over the years, it's all right because It's all right because, and you know, you sort of hearing that growing up as youth process, but before you even had verbalized this awful thing that had happened to you, you know, you were a child who had experienced these awful things. But it's all right if the person has enough standing in the community.
Yep. Yep.
I'm so sorry.
That's a good way of thinking about that. I'm just going to need to be excused for a moment because my daughter.
Absolutely,
I'll
of course.
You
go, Alana.
Sarah, you were going to speak there. Please share.
I just wanted to say, I mean, it's the horrificness of the sexual abuse, the sexual harm, the trauma that has been caused to all the people that were involved, the real life people in Keep Sweetener Bay, and the real life people today that are experiencing that. But there's so many parallels to the extent, like the early church, Joseph wanted to gather everybody together in one area and not really have that much, you know, we build our camp here, we'll be together, we're gathered together, we'll stick together as a group. Well, that's what Warren Jeffs did. We'll take everybody, we'll stick together as a group, we'll block all your outsiders out because we don't really want you around. We'll keep everybody away from your outsiders because that's a much better way to keep our children pure and innocent and testimonies intact. And how much have we seen this over the years of the church that has gone by? You know, in the 70s, in the 80s, it was get your kids to play with other kids that are members of the church, get your youth to date other members of the church. Don't encourage, if you possibly can, stop your kids from having boyfriends or girlfriends that are not members of the church. This insular, circle the wagons, stay close together, keep outsiders away, which feeds into some of the early persecution mantras that were going on, and with very good reason. I'm not saying there weren't good reasons for the early church to have persecution fears and mantra and to be traumatized themselves because of what they experienced and to want to behave that way. But we see that coming out in how fundamentalists are still living. They're still feeling persecuted, rejected, and they're still living in that way now.
And so the persecution being experienced, you know, people feeling persecuted for what can be good reason, people also feeling fearful of the community, experiencing, you know, being on the receiving, the other side of that, you know, being insular. Speak to me about exploitation.
Well, don't we see that in the Keep Sweetener Bay, that exploitation of young men being sent away, being kicked out of the compound, the family unit, the home, being kicked out, got rid of, young girls being moved, transported to wherever they wanted them to go so that they could have sexual relationships, live with people, women, children. In Keep Sweetener Bay, they were running their whole companies. They were kind of incredibly wealthy because everybody was working for free labour. So you've got people being trafficked all over the place for labour, for marriage, for sexual relationships, coercion, a complete lack of control over your own life. People weren't allowed to choose. You know, there was no fundamental freedom of choice for them, was there, in Keep Sweetener Bay? They couldn't decide what they were going to wear. They couldn't decide how to do their hair. They couldn't decide who they were going to marry, who they were going to love. They couldn't decide what job they were going to do. There was this complete coercive control over every aspect of what they were doing. And with that, it was all enabled by the way they were able to exploit religious text and scripture and exploit prophets' messages in days gone by as well as in the current day. They could exploit those messages in order to keep the people under that level of control.
So
and we can't say that we don't see elements of that today. We can't say we don't.
And so yeah, exactly. And we get to fundamentalism in the same way as we're going to get, as you pointed out, to radicalization. We get to fundamentalism because ultimately we, you know, and it's more complex than this, but you know, there are a series of things that lead to it, which will include the feeling of the religion, or specifically the church itself, the faith organization, being under threat. So when there's a threat there, you know, that when also there is a us against them, specifically the church against whoever it is, who is the enemy, you know, for Latter-day Saints, it's the world. And we don't mean by that the whole world, it's worldliness, but you know, it could be the world.
We keep hearing constantly today the threat of religious freedom. And the church talk about religious freedom, the threat to religious freedom over and over again today, don't they?
They do. And
which is the other side of that.
Exactly. And where fundamentalism becomes easier to sort of, it becomes more appealing, is if you are not a marginalized group or person or have had those experiences, or basically if you can adhere to it, it will work really, really well for you. If there's less tension there, you know, there's less of a need to become, you know, it's a very comfortable space for you. You're reassured and it's safe. You know, we sort of mingle that with politics, with just, you know, the change in the world. Those are the things that sort of lead to some of the things that lead to fundamentalism, but also radicalization. So this brings us to Under the Banner of Heaven.
Oh
my
goodness.
husband
me.
is a non-member. He's never been a member of the church, and he one horrible time I made him guilt tripped him to come to the Stake Centre to watch a broadcast of Joseph Smith, Prophet of the Restoration. And he said, what else can he say? It's, you know, it was okay. It was a weird evening out for him. Again, there's not an actual real drama. People can tell. It's lovely for members of the church who want to be reassured and hear a nice story that they're familiar with, and there's no complexity, there's no dark and light side to any character, never mind one as well loved as Joseph Smith or Emma or any of those people. Brigham Young, definitely not. In fact, we even see in the Work and the Glory, can I just say, portrays
The Work and the Glory,
Brigham Young.
Yeah.
Oh, hello. He's I mean, the opposite of what Brigham Young actually looked like, because let's face it, that was not an appealing man. But you know, we have these airbrushed stories that we want to present to people. You know, I was speaking to someone the other night who was sharing with me their experience of when missionaries came to see her. And you know, whenever missionaries are talking about how one of the things they'll focus on is families can be together. So here is a woman who opens the door, and she's a very faithful woman. She has her own religious background and is open to listening to what they're saying. And as they share how wonderful it is that your family can be together forever, she experiences something different, but my family don't all believe. So if you're saying heaven looks like family, but they won't be there, and there was this complexity that she was sitting in, that you could see that she didn't quite get. There is nuance in what the missionaries are teaching, but also the missionaries just did not get this. If you present an airbrushed image, people can tell. It's like something that's really badly photoshopped and you don't know quite what's wrong, but it's, when you see it, you can't stop seeing it. So Under the Banner of Heaven, my husband was super excited to see it, because he's like, oh, we're going to get a Mormon story here. And there's going to be some...
We did get a Mormon story.
We got a real Mormon story. So was it a true story? Tell me about that.
I mean, clearly, Under the Banner of Heaven, it was absolutely based on a true story. Clearly, there's been dramatic and dramatisation and poetic license and creativity taken to make the story flow and to make it fit for screen. But it's based on the absolute basic facts that people held on to the fact that blood atonement was a thing. They held on to the fact that somebody could be removed if they were standing in what they thought was the way of the will of God. And it linked strong that extreme radicalization, yet again, of a family that probably set out to be righteous, to live the will of God, to do all things, to do the things they should be doing, to serve missions, to serve their community. They were described as a strong, upstanding family. The parents were going off on a senior mission, all this stuff going on. And yet, underneath it all, you see this increasing radicalization and extremism creeping in because of fear that they couldn't get people to do what they wanted, fear that they were under threat.
Sarah, would you mind if I interrupt for just a little second, because I want you to follow that thought in a moment, but because something real that I feel really sad about is happening right now.
Right.
So for those who don't know, Under the Banner, if you haven't watched it yet, it is bloody good stuff. It was, you know, some of the performances were up for awards, very well researched. And it's the story of the true story of Ron and Dan Lafferty, who murdered Brenda Lafferty, their sister-in-law, and her infant child. Now, do you know, I've got little goosebumps because this moment that I'm not going to forget has just arrived. That you know, at one point, Alana, in her faith journey, as Alana was learning about all of these things, would send me a message, even if it was in the middle of the night, and would be like, okay, I've heard this term, what is this? And I would be like, oh, we're at that point, are we? And I would send a reply. I would usually just call straight away and be like, okay, well, it's complicated, so we need to have a discussion. Alana, you didn't even blink when Sarah said blood atonement. And one of the things that we wanted to do in this podcast is because Alana had a particular set of eyes that were new to it, that were processing things, that one of Alana's jobs was to say, okay, the audience might not know what that is because I didn't know what that was. So can you just stop and tell the audience, what are you talking about there? And I just feel really, really sad that you didn't do that.
Sorry, I think I was too focused on the bot that we've got coming up in our chat, and I was trying to.
We get a bot. Oh, it's normally just PD who gets a bot.
No, we've got it.
We got a bot.
I think I was kind of trying to deal with that. So apologies.
Yeah, choose the right people. Choose the right.
Yeah, choose the right.
Yeah, no,
and be kind, people. Choose the right. Be kind.
Yeah, no little factory stuff going on in the chat, or bring your tissues. We are sex positive in this podcast. I'm going to say that you're not going to get a lot of deal for your money if you.
It's funny because the one thing that I was thinking along the lines of when we were speaking about it, just again because not everybody's clued up. Like I was thinking, even the word radicalization. Like, how would you explain that to someone? That was in my mind earlier, but I didn't see it.
It's a really good point.
What would you? How would you sum up the word radicalization?
That's a really good point. I think when you take a basic principle and carry it to extreme lengths and become utterly fixated on it. So, for example, I mean, like in Banner, we saw so many examples of it.
Well, actually, could I ask you not to do it about Mormonism? Can I ask you to do it in the context of, as we think about safeguarding, why it's really important that schools are aware of radicalization?
And really important that churches are fully aware of radicalization.
Exactly.
Radicalization is when anyone who is vulnerable, it can actually be anybody, but very particularly vulnerable people, children, young people, become obsessed with a particular topic, and they are fed information about it consistently and constantly to the extent where it completely alters their worldview and it influences their attitudes, their values, their beliefs. We saw it with those 3 girls, Shema Begum and the other girls that ended up going to Syria. they had been radicalized to the point where they had been completely and utterly convinced that what they were off to do was the right thing to do. We see it with young people that get caught up in National Front and the neo-Nazi movements. They become absolutely convinced and hold all of their values and principles that they are right, that this country is under extreme threat and they have to protect and do everything they do to protect people in this country. They become so radical in their desire to live out the values and principles that they have had kind of forced upon them. And people who do this are expert groomers.
Yeah.
They are absolute experts at being able to get people to take on board their view and only their view.
Well, thank you for explaining that. So before I get you to
it?
No, it did. It did.
Okay.
Before we talk about, just because it is really important to know, I think, what blood atonement is, even though I know it's been discussed on podcast after podcast. Alana, did you like the show? What did you think of Under the Banner in general?
I thought it was okay. Like, I don't know. I think, again, it was one of those ones that was hard to watch, you know, when you imagine the death. And I know it was real life of a person and a child due to this. I feel like I'd hoped to try and rewatch it again this week, but I've just had a pretty busy week this week. So I think I possibly will revisit it just to see if I see it differently this time round. I guess because I went on with that, I guess, almost barrier. Not because I didn't want to believe what was going on, but just not sure what was going to come. I think after watching Keep Sweet Prey in a Bay, like, I was a bit reserved about what might come up in it. Yeah, I guess I just don't always see the things that other people see. So that's why I think I would be interested to go back and rewatch it just to see if I see it in a different light this time.
Yeah. I feel like I feel like it showed such a good story, but also the main narrator is Andrew Garfield. So you've still, although we have Brenda's eyes, we're really just sort of speculating about what she was thinking, feeling, experiencing. We don't really get to see so much of her wrestle. That said, the actress did a fantastic job. You know, like she was up for awards, for her performance. But yeah, I feel like it for me, I was sort of thinking, right, okay, you know, we're going to see another man in pain, and I think it was the right. Jeb himself does not exist. That was a character that they've created, and as he's dealing with this crime, I just
can we just say he's the detective, just in case anyone hasn't seen it.
I was going to get you to explain this, Sarah, because I was in stitches as this week Alana and I opened our messages, and she's like, what kind of police officer is called to go investigate a double homicide and stops for a family prayer? And I just thought,
that was the first 2 minutes into watching Banner, and that was the first thing. I'm thinking, hang on, you're a police officer. You've just had a phone call to tell you there's been a double murder of a woman and a 15-month-old baby. And the first thing and I get this is creative. I'm not saying this truly happened, but this is in the creative. Although the problem is I could see it happening. In the creative license, the first thing he did was gathered his family, had family prayer before he went off to do his job and solve this, instead of kind of rushing out the door. I was thinking, hang on, so he stopped for family prayer. Okay.
I love it, because it's read into you. So tell me about blood atonement.
That's the key bit. It's bred into you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, blood atonement, there's a lot of debate, isn't there, about whether it was ever taught, whether it wasn't taught, but then there's enough stuff about it that you read it, you hear about it. It's one of those,
we know it existed. Yeah.
We know it existed. It was very much a theory that if you took somebody's life, then you would have to atone for that by shedding your own blood.
So let me just phrase that in a slightly different way, because I think it's important for context. That supposedly the Brigham Young had supposedly taught that some sins are so great that they will not be covered by the atonement of Jesus Christ.
And you have to atone for them yourself, and that therefore you will have to, like, murder is one of the sins that we we're told and taught is not covered by the atonement, and you will have to atone for that yourself after this life. Right.
But also,
And
you know, it could be adultery. People were talking
well,
about
it could
blood
be, yeah.
atoning their wives,
Oh,
or there
well,
were
actually,
all
people were
sorts of
talking
things.
about blood atoning and removing anybody who they felt stood in
Yes.
the way of obeying the prophet.
And you say that
So
word
it could
removing. Yes, that's how it would be
removing.
referred to.
That was actually the word. Like, this person is getting in the way of the church's mission, getting in the way of obedience, getting in the way of faithfulness. So they need to be removed. Let's get rid of them out of their place, so they can no longer.
And the idea of it being an act of absolute compassion and love for your fellow man, that if you got to the end of days and you knew that, you know, that this was something that had to have been done, that you would be, you know, Brigham Young sort of saying, you know, that man would beg me to
shed his
shed
blood.
my blood. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
And this is the theory behind why they had a firing squad in Utah for the death penalty. Now, I'm not saying, I'm not going to say that's 100% true, but this is some of the rationale that people give for why the death penalty in Utah was actually by firing squad, because that shed blood, whereas the electric chair, lethal injection, nothing else actually shed blood. And there was a
Alana,
sense that was felt to be very
yes,
important.
yeah, absolutely. Alana, you seem like you're
I've
amused.
heard this, but no, I've heard this. Like, you've talked to me about blood atonement so many times, but see, hearing it over again, it's mental.
It is mental.
It's mental.
And I'm not suggesting we go there more than in a very, very quick statement. And those who know will know, and those who don't, it's probably best we don't go there. But this does lead itself back to the temple oaths that many of us will have taken at one point as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sarah, thank you for mentioning that so sensitively, and also that those marks are carried around and
those scars and those trauma and scars of that are carried by so many. Yeah. The trauma of that.
My question is this: the show itself asks, and also the book that it's based on, that I'm gonna have something to say about that in a second. John Krakauer's book was the source material for this show. Does Mormonism breed dangerous men?
I think Mormonism can breed dangerous men, and I think it breeds not necessarily some men in Mormonism are absolutely wonderful, fantastic, compassionate, caring, lovely human beings. It can give some men a sense of power, control, and superiority, and white supremacy. And I think the danger is within the church. There is such a history of white supremacy and misogyny and women's voices being disempowered and marginalized, that I think there's a real danger that those can come together in Sarah, a man who is acceptable.
Can I just interrupt? It's my turn to have a little family crisis. I'll be back momentarily.
Oh, I had one earlier.
Yeah, we're all having them this evening.
We're all having them tonight.
This is our welcome to our show. This is what we do. So could I ask perhaps that you two, Alana, perhaps you could, Sarah, if you could continue your thought about Mormonism breeding dangerous men. Alana, I would really like to hear your thoughts on that too, and I will be right back with you. If you could talk a little bit about your own experiences of that power dynamic.
Yeah, we'll go for that, Jane. Good luck. You deal with your crisis, girl. Okay, right. I think so. If you've got men that are vulnerable to wanting to feel powerful and in control, then we have all sorts of messages that are given throughout the church that tell them that they are more important. The family proclamation tells them they're the head of the family. Well, you can't have a head and everybody else is equal, because you don't have a head where everybody's equal. So that kind of is a little bit of a subtle message, like, well, I'm the head of the family. And we actually saw this detective in the creativity of Banner coming out with a couple of those statements as he was going through a crisis, like, hang on, I'm your husband. And we saw the Laffertys were strongly based on people that had become absolutely, I am the man, I am the husband, I am the priesthood holder, your job is to obey your priesthood holder. So there's dangerous messages that can lead people to feeling that they have the right of entitlement and the right to be in control. And as I say, we need to be so careful because the vast majority of Mormon men are fabulous.
Yeah, no,
Fabulous.
like, I mean,
but
I would have answered
some
that.
are not.
Yeah, I would have answered that question to James saying yes, and not fully to everyone like yourself, but I think just from especially leaving the church and being in a few ex-Mormon groups to hear the stories of, like I often say to Jane, you know, that the church also breeds narcissists, you know, I
Yes,
hear
it does, yeah.
All the time, and it's that power, that control, you know, like, and I think just going back to what you said about, you know, the man being the head of the home, like I'm being blatantly honest here, I hate the Family Proclamation. At one time I thought it was great, but now having read it and reread it and taking it from my perspective, who's an independent parent, where the Family Proclamation's telling you that, you know, the man's the head of the home and the woman's the, you know, well, I don't have a man. So I'm the head of the home, you know, and it doesn't create me to be this power dynamic. But I think within the church, like you've said, you know, there's so much of this. Men make the decisions, men get all the high up callings, you know, and women, again, have that feeling of silence, that feeling of not being as good as the men, because we don't get to have those elements of that decision making, the high up callings.
Before you jump in, Sarah, can I just say, Alana, you in the church sort of hierarchy with teaching, and I know that members may disagree, but when it comes to making spiritual decisions and responsibilities for your family's spiritual welfare, you're not the head of your home. You know who is? Your dad, possibly your brother-in-law. Your dad's really.
Because they're no active.
Yeah, but you know what I mean, right? At that time. Sorry, continue, Sarah.
Yeah, but even that's problematic though, you know, because like again, where's my say in my home? This is my home. This isn't my dad's home. This isn't my brother-in-law's home. This is my home, mine and my daughter's home. So that doesn't work for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's your home and you make the decisions and you're the one that has the right to do that. But those aren't the subtle messages given. I remember years and years ago seeing an example of how women, by believing it is the righteous thing to do and that they are standing closer to God and being righteous by doing it, buy into giving men power and authority. And I remember being at the home of a family whose the husband was away on business. She was at home with the children on her own. The kids were kind of from primary school age up to middle teenage years. And it was time for morning prayer. We were all just going out somewhere for the day. And she gathered the family together for morning prayer and then turned to one of her teenage sons and said his name, and then said, as Dad is away, you are the priesthood holder in charge now. Will you please organise family prayer? And I'm like, no. If you want to ask your son to organise family prayer, cool, go ahead, ask your son to get everyone together and sort family prayer out. But don't say to him, because your dad's away, you're the priesthood holder, it's now your role and your job to take over from your dad because he's not here when you're the mother. Because that's not, that, you know, those don't give the right messages, do they? And I'm not saying that, you know, that came necessarily as a rightful teaching,
it's that power element,
it's that interpretation.
From a young age, you know, it's taught from such a young age. You know,
and it is explicitly
you've got the responsibility, you've got this, you've got that. So
that's right,
bred into them from such a young age.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but say it would have been 2-3 years ago now, and I had popped onto LDS Tools, and as I looked in the directory, my name didn't appear. It was my husband's name, who has never been a member of the church, and is also,
that's interesting,
has never ever sort of given his details to sort of provide that. He, you know, has no church record at all, but the head of the household. And as you know, we'd sort of, to my horror, because you know he wouldn't be okay with that, to my horror, as we're scrolling down, there's a very well loved divorced woman in our ward, and her record was with the heads of her household of one, her as an individual, the heads of her household is the husband that she's been divorced from what, 40 plus years. Horrific.
Why do we think it is okay in the year 2022 to have the church directory of people's names organised by head of the family, head of the household? And I'm just on Family Tools now to see if I can see an example of that.
They did change it. They did update that. So it was a.
That's good, because that
however it had happened.
That might stop me flipping if they've done that. That's good. Because I mean, come on. I mean, just why do people think that is okay?
I'm going to come back to the idea of radicalization is going to flow throughout this conversation, but I really want to share this that I thought was just so fascinating. It's one of my favorite parts of the book, by Jon Krakauer. The story of Under the Banner doesn't actually stop. At that point, a trial would later go on and happen that raises some fascinating questions that it really, really affects me today. If you don't mind, I'm just going to quote this little section. What if the reporter's having a conversation with Dan Lafferty, and he's asking Dan, what if Dan got it all wrong? Has it occurred to him that he may, in fact, have a great deal in common with another fundamentalist of fanatical conviction, Osama bin Laden? I've asked myself that, Dan concedes. Could I be there? Is that what I'm like? And the answer is no, because Osama bin Laden is a child of the devil. I believe his real motivation isn't a quest for honesty and justice, which were maybe his motivations in his earlier life. Now he's motivated by greed, profit, and power. What about Osama's underlings, the holy warriors who sacrificed their lives for Allah by flying jumbo jets into the World Trade Center? Surely their faith and conviction were every bit as powerful as Dan's. Does he think the sincerity of their belief justified the act? And if not, how can Dan know that what he did isn't every bit as misguided as was bin Laden's followers on September 11th, despite the obvious sincerity of his own faith? As he pauses to consider this possibility, there comes a moment when a shadow of doubt seems to flicker, but only for an instant, and then it's gone. I have to admit, the terrorists were following their prophet, Dan said. They were willing to do essentially what I did. I see the parallel, but the difference between those guys and me is they were following a false prophet, and I'm not.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's powerful. So where does that suggest that faithful members of the church would go with all the teachings about the rules of unbending, following the prophet, obedience to priesthood leaders? Where does that suggest faithful, righteous, in the eyes of the church, worthy church members would go if the prophet came out with something that they were to go and be doing that was actually quite radical? I'm not suggesting killing people, but supposing the prophet was to come up with something. I mean, we saw just tiny thing on that, didn't we? When the prophet said that you weren't allowed to have more than one earring.
Mm-hmm.
And the prophet announced it because it seemed to be essential for salvation for people to know that they should only ever have one earring, shouldn't it? I mean, clearly messes up eternal salvation if you have two. And he said from the stand, he announced it and said, only one earring. People were talking about how righteous their daughter had been, or their wife, or this, because they'd gone home that night and taken their second earring out and never wore it again. And that's a tiny, kind of minuscule, harmless thing. But it was actually that instant obedience the prophet has said, I will go and do. And
there are the minuscule things, but we underpin it. Well, exactly how far does it go, and what does that look like in the life of the individual? So the first thing that I need to add into the mixing pot here is that, you know, whenever we talked about Alana, whenever you talked about being the head of your own home, and that actually my suggestion was that according to very, very strict rules of, you know, who ministers to your family, who is spiritually responsible for your family, it would be your father, your nearest male relative. It would be even at a stretch your home teachers
teacher.
if there was no one else.
Just say home teachers.
Now ministering it, yeah, you know, but ultimately, yeah, and the buck stopping with the bishop. But in the Lafferty's case, the head of the family is one of the brothers, or he's certainly seen as head of the family. The other brothers are then making the decision. So as heads of the family, the head of the family receives revelation, and they're being taught this from their parents.
Yes.
They are obedient to that revelation. Do they need to ask if it comes from God? Well, if we ask those questions, then are we sustaining our leaders? And then there's the family dynamic. You know, the other doctrinal underpinning is that at least once every 4 years, is it? We and regularly talked about in church discussions, obedience is the first law of heaven.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert that I'm going to do. No, it isn't. But also,
but we are taught
Abraham.
it is.
Well, yes, we are taught that
and that's
it is.
Reality, we're taught it is.
And the churches that exist today, yes, we're taught it is, and it's underpinned by, we hold up Abraham sacrificing his son. You know, if you're willing to do that, lay your son on the altar, and what a wonderful example of obedience, because he knew somehow that it was all going to be okay. That is crazy talk. That is
absolutely, isn't it?
I remember saying, you know, commenting in a Sunday school class, and I think it was the first time I'd ever really commented. I comment and everything else. I've always got something to say. It just so happened, I'd never mentioned this before, but yeah, if God tells you to murder someone, then you can safely say that is not coming from God. You take what you know about God, and then you say, does that mean? No, it doesn't sound like God.
But do you know what? And you're right. We should know that. We should know that that doesn't come from God, and that isn't God. But the problem is, scriptures are replete with stories of that. You've got Abraham, you've got Nephi cutting Laban's head off. You've got all kinds of stuff going on, haven't you? About, do you know what I mean? Around things like this going on in scriptures.
And it's
we're
important.
Told, and don't forget, in the LDS world, scriptures are literal. We're not saying this is a metaphor, we're not saying it's a story, we're not saying they're parables. In the LDS world, those are literal.
Now, these two men,
when fundamentalism comes from that absolute literal translation of everything that prophets have ever taught and spoken.
When these two men are apprehended, they are casual, you know, the idea that there was sort of this, you know, big moment, you know, this in the toilets, they were chilling. They were quite happy. They're apprehended. They go to jail, and it isn't until sort of way down the road an insanity plea eventually is presented. I don't think they really were sort of holding it. I think they sort of had. It was about game playing at this point, but yeah, Alana, you get any idea were they found guilty or not guilty of, you know, insanity? Was that accepted as a plea? Do you?
It was not. Right, it wasn't.
It was not. So, and that brings us to the question. So, if you are not insane, and God tells you to commit a murder, at what point is it God? At what point is it you? And it brings us back to how many times during conferences, especially from young single adults, do we hear the same questions being asked of leaders? How do I know if this revelation is just coming from me, or if this inspiration is just coming from me? When is it me? When is it the Spirit? The golden question that every radicalized person has this experience of. You have to be super faithful. You're not radicalized if you've not bought into it. You know, my husband's not going to be a radicalized Mormon because he has no interest. But it's the people who, you know, are held up. Now, initially, these guys were very ordinary guys. They were, not necessarily, I think, super Mormon in their word, but their parents were very, very strict Mormon. They become radicalized in this perfect mix of toxicity. And at no point does anyone say, what if I am wrong? This makes no sense. This is mad.
But
So
we're
when
taught
I'm
not to question, we're not supposed to question
Yeah.
or challenge, because how often do we hear that statement? When the prophet speaks, the debate is over.
well,
I see. Sorry, I was
Alana,
going to say,
please
I'm
go.
just sitting here thinking about what you're saying there. Just when you're talking about the whole, if God tells you to kill someone,
Yeah.
I think there comes a moment, especially in this day and age, where I would be saying, "Are you insane?" Like,
Right.
because you're sitting thinking, like, why would God ask me to kill someone? Like, I think there comes an element of especially if you're declared not insane, like to
Can I
say, right, well, this isn't from God. God would not ask me to kill someone.
Can I ask you a question? How many of us, just us three, how many of us have ever paid tithing when we were drinking the Kool-Aid and bathing in the waters of Mormonism? How many of us have ever paid tithing when it meant we couldn't pay our household bills?
Yep.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yes, but you were racked with
more
guilt.
sensible woman than us.
Yeah,
Right.
I was racked with a
Right.
lot of guilt over not paying it, but I chose not to because I'm not going to see
Yeah.
my child go without.
And so where I
But
guess
you
I'm
see,
coming
if you
from.
think intelligent, sensible, calm people like us, Jane, and I think we're pretty intelligent, all three of us,
Yeah.
we made a decision based on what we had been told by the prophet,
Mhm.
the fact that you can't pay your phone bill and your phone's going to get disconnected, then actually that has to be because you have to pay your tithing.
You see, I think even really, really smart people get into this. I'm fascinated by the idea of how you would know. I have OCD and I sort of flirt a little bit with, oh my goodness, what if I'm mad? What if I'm crazy? What if, with this kind of self-doubt, and that's one of my fears. And so I think about this question a lot when it comes to when we go online. Now, I know that this week especially, we've had particular experiences that we can sort of sit and say, oh, yes, I'm going to need to kind of slow down to help the audience get where I'm talking about here. But as an engaged Mormon, I'm going online and I'm seeing another engaged Mormon eviscerate and be incredibly cruel and judgmental to people who are podcasting, to members of other faiths who are making accusations that you don't know these people. You're assigning some sinister motive and whatever that looks like. And I really believe, and this is that we're going to talk about one particular individual simply because there was this is just my perfect example. This is a lovely, lovely man, a faithful man, a pious man. He's well respected in his community. He does a lot of good. There's a lot of kindness there. But he goes online and really believes that the right thing to do in that moment is cruel and unkind. And I don't believe he recognizes it as cruelty or unkindness. I think he thinks he's doing the Lord's work, but also thinks so did the Laffertys at that point, that the real favor that you're doing is to call that person to repentance because they need to be blood. And I think that is at the root of whether it's as serious a thing, as horrific a thing as blood atoning someone, is to think that you're in charge of rescuing someone's soul because you have all of this knowledge. You've got this special understanding. And more than that, you have the priesthood. You have the authority of God.
Right.
I think it comes back to that option of where you're taught, even as women growing up in the church, we need to stand up for what's right. We need to stand up for the church. So they believe wholeheartedly that because certain podcasters, are speaking out against the church or trying to make changes within the church, that they have to stand up and say, no, you're wrong. because they have to show that
Yeah.
they're standing up for what people are saying against
Yeah.
the church.
And that's where we're seeing this extreme loyalty coupled with the excessive need that we see within Mormonism for a leader. There's an excessive need for people within Mormonism to have a leader that they can trust and rely on and place all their faith in and feel confident in that leader. There's an excessive need for loyalty, and actually people demonstrate their worthiness. I hate that word, but people demonstrate their worthiness by how well they're prepared, as Alana says, to stick up for the church. And if they're prepared to come out all guns blazing to attack anyone who they think might be saying anything slightly detrimental to the church, then in their view, people think they're elevating themselves to a kind of superior sainthood position almost.
It almost makes it, makes you able to sort of reframe worthiness interviews as being loyalty interviews.
Yeah.
You know, I've
Well,
heard it said that if you could reduce the temple recommend questions to 1, and I know there's a lot of discussion about this, but this was genuinely taught to me by several members, that it would be, do you pay a full tithe?
Yeah. Well, that is taken as the measure, isn't it? That is taken as such a measure as somebody's faith in God and somebody's faithfulness and obedience is whether you're a full tithe payer. There is such a phenomenal amount based on that. And let's think about what that's about. Why is it the tithing that is actually the measure of somebody's worthiness and faithfulness to the gospel? Why is tithing the measure? When tithing actually...
I don't
why that?
believe that it really should be, or in effect it is. In effect, yes, you're right. But I think if we really believe what we teach, no, of course not.
But we've got such a problem. We don't believe our own stuff in the church.
Exactly. So I need to leave time for something that we urgently want to talk about. So I'm gonna come to a couple of final quick points, if we can maybe just touch on them. The members of the church are presented with, I want to talk about true history. I want to talk about, facts and things that actually happened. These things actually happened, and it draws on perspectives about Joseph and Emma Brigham, about church history, things that maybe mainstream members of the church haven't necessarily heard before, and makes us really uncomfortable. Now, Alana and I, as Scottish women, Alana, do you like the film Braveheart?
Yeah.
Right. We, as Scots, we get asked, if you have ever watched that film, you're from another country, they ask us, do you believe that was true history? Of course we don't. It's a bloody great film though, right? It's cheesy. It's not going to be one of the best films of all time and remembered before, we have to watch this before we die. But oh my goodness, we have a party in Scotland anytime they play it. It's, we're all from the UK. I'm having a watch party with my mother next week because The Crown is coming on. True history? Of course not. Causes offense, absolutely, and we have to be sensitive to the people that it affects. But we know that we're taking some dramatic license here, and so for members of the church to sort of feel those concerns about being faced with history, I think in one respect, I would love church members to lighten up a bit and not feel that need for a perfectly presented, tied up in a bow history. So that would be really nice. But what's going to be presented as something that's complicated, is problematic, and we see the custody scene happen where the detective has this horrific response to being asked by a church leader, sort of the church leader is invoking his authority, and to the point where if Jeb were to obey, he would be breaking the law, really. It wouldn't be an okay thing to do. Now, that scene didn't happen in real life. That wasn't a real thing. That was, the how these guys were caught happened in a completely different way. So it didn't happen like that. But what it allowed us to do was to look at that relationship with authority, is to look at this really, really moral man. Now, I don't think the church would ever say, can you release a suspect into my custody? But oh my goodness, I will tell you right now, I am so naive, because we do also know that high church leadership do get very involved in testifying for supporting people who've been accused, to the point where victims are being seriously mistreated. Now, we know that lines are crossed there. So if we could maybe, just leave that as, that is a thing that might not have happened, but there are issues with that.
Yeah.
We get to see Jeb have this visceral reaction to being let down by a church leader.
Yeah.
Who is using his authority, that ecclesiastical abuse. And he responds by vomiting. He has to vomit. Talk to me about that moment, Alana. Is it realistic? He's a detective. He's not a soft guy. Is he just a really, this soft little Mormon? What happens when your church leaders behave in a way that is completely incongruous with everything that you thought that you knew?
If you're in the middle or you're at the start of a faith and trust crisis, and you are really struggling, hugely struggling with a trust, testimony and faith crisis with the church, and a church leader comes along and puts that kind of pressure on you, then yes, because it throws that button of terror, it triggers that fear, that panic, that what if I'm wrong and I don't do what you're telling me to do, and you're this person and you're that person, and should I do what you're telling me? But you've got no right to ask me that, and that's wrong. I don't think it was an extreme reaction. I don't. I think that reaction, until you get to the point where you can truly sit back and say, you know what? You don't own me. Don't tell me what to do. You do not control my life. I control my life. Until you can truly get to that point with the church, then yes, I think a church leader trying to pull rank like that, and we've all been there in different ways when they've tried it on like that.
Yeah,
I was just about to say that. Being the Mormon that I was growing up,
I wouldn't have, when it's happened.
I've been in situations where I've just accepted everything they've said, like even if somewhere in there I've not agreed, like even more recent, although I was angry about how it was handled, I think, well, who am I?
Do you want to talk about it, Alana?
Question that, because they're the leaders, they're in charge. They speak to God, they get revelation from God. So
be more specific.
And we're not allowed to say no. We're not allowed to say no to our leaders, are we?
Well, what if it's not that you're saying, because it's very, very rare, I think. First of all, Sarah, you said trust crisis. I think that's exactly what we're talking about here, and what a faith crisis, if we're going to call it that, really is. But very rarely, you maybe get examples like John Dehlin, who's told take your podcast down or stop, or someone who has been under threat of excommunication being told to stop or change. Alana, could you maybe give some context? Only because I know you've done it in the show several times before, so I feel comfortable to ask you. Could you give some context to that? What you are saying as a leader from a pulpit is wrong.
Yeah. So there was an instance of a high up leader, not like high up, but high up stake president, let's just say, I don't have any issue saying it, who said something on the pulpit that I know that myself and many other members felt was not okay, the way that it was presented. It made me feel sick to my stomach and uncomfortable. And I remember thinking, we're taught in the church that if something doesn't feel good, it's not from God. But you also have that element of questioning yourself, because you think, is it just me who's feeling uncomfortable by this? But as you look around, you can see not only people around about you who are annoyed, and someone walks out, to which you then realise, I have to walk out because I could feel the anger and everything, and as we know, we don't take angry feelings to church, and so leave. It really ate up at me. I had a discussion with a family member who was on the bishopric at the time, and he suggested, yeah, go speak to the bishop about it, tell him how you feel. Well, I wish to this day I had never ever had that conversation with the bishop at the time. I went in and I just very nicely said, that I really had to address this because I feel that it was wrong what he said, how it made people feel. It was put across in a way that wasn't, to me, from God. It wasn't what God would want him to do or say, to basically be told that he didn't agree. But he was one of the ones that I felt didn't, like, it's hard to obviously read someone because you don't know if it's the red face because he's thinking, this is my word, this, but to me it seemed as though it was like,
I think he agrees.
I don't agree with this kind of thing.
No, I think he did, but again, I just was made to feel again I was so wrong, that it was me. I just was feeling this way, but I told him it wasn't just me, it was other people. And I came out of that office in a terrible state, and I swore from that day I would never go back in to speak to my bishop about anything, and I didn't, not that bishop, because it just again made me feel this is me that's in the wrong. This isn't. I got it wrong. Well, more than that, because I think what the thing that led to not just what had happened was something that caused trauma for you, caused spiritual trauma.
Yeah.
But your mental health was being.
Oh yeah, my mental health was also brought into, when I'm away up here, what was that the word?
When you're away up here, but then you didn't actually say it, but when it's down there. So the indication is
up here. So it was me. It was my mental health that was taken it the wrong way, basically.
So I think not just in this movie, not just in your experience, this is something we hear again and again, and I'm so thank you in the comments for what you're sharing. This vulnerability, this doesn't happen easy. Jeb doesn't have this experience and leave the church, because see if people had those experiences and left the church, they're not. So this happens when someone is deeply engaged and loves the church, and something happens that it throws your whole world off course. To then suggest that if Jeb had have just been reading these scriptures a little bit more. So we get to see Jeb who actually does all of those, he's turning to the scriptures, he's counselling with his leaders. Does not go well. I want to just wrap up the section about this just by asking, tell me what in your opinions, what's next for Jeb? What happens next in his story? It's not a spoiler alert if we're making it up, right? What is likely to happen to Jeb?
He's going to leave the church.
Yeah.
I think he's going to play the game for a long time with his wife and children, because he doesn't want the heartbreak that comes from that impact on family and family relationships. But I don't think Jeb will be able to stay in the church, because he's a very authentic, honest guy.
Yeah.
And at some point he's going to have to say, I can't do this anymore. This isn't right.
We see the divorce.
I think he's got
the threat of divorce is made very, very clear to him. Alana, do you think, do they make it? Are they going to make it?
I personally feel that down the line, no, they wouldn't, because I think when you put yourself in the position of someone who's in a faith crisis, you can only hold up that narrative for so long. Like, you can only have that persona of trying, and and it gets you eventually, because how long did that, if I put it in my own experience, like I tried for a good couple of years, I kept trying to go to church, and it was hard for me, because I was having church anxiety, the trauma it was causing me, the realization of things, but I'm still trying to go, I'm still trying to be this faithful person, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So I think there would come a point where, even if he had to lose his family, I think you couldn't possibly hold that up for the rest of your life.
And and do you know one of the things, and I know Total Dramatic License within the story. I know it didn't happen in real life, but we saw his wife being very angry and very upset and very concerned when the children's baptism, and Jeb said, I think we should put the baptism off. And her huge worry was, what about the shame? People are going to judge, they're going to think the children have failed their baptismal interview. The whole weight of public fear, humiliation and shame upon that mother if her children weren't baptized at age 8, as soon as they were 8 years old, was almost too much for her to bear. And she kind of threw that at Jeb, and he was like, well, hang on. And you can just see those situations getting worse and worse and worse and more problematic as time goes on.
And you know, to be fair, if I had been sewing baptismal clothing for months and months and a couple of days before, you know, right, you would have wanted to, go crazy with him. But you know,
but it's the fact that it was a shame and public humiliation that was the issue for her, wasn't it? And because it's so real.
So I know we could talk so much more about this, but there is a show that I really, really want to talk about that I'm so sorry if in America you guys haven't been able to see this yet, but I need to talk about Scotland's Biggest Families. This was a programme that was on BBC here in the UK this week. Some sneaky little Americans who downloaded VPNs, I hear, which I do not advocate for, but there may be advice online about people who want to do that. It's still available online for people who want to watch it, so that's through BBC iPlayer.
Can I just say, I think, Jane, I think we should add an absolute rider to this, that unless you have a BBC licence, it is illegal for you to watch BBC. So we are not advocating you watch BBC channels in any way unless you have a licence, because it would be illegal. So we are not advocating it. But you are agents unto yourselves. You are agents unto yourselves, but we could not advocate.
Let's just say there was discussion about it online, and it is still online. If you want to come and join Sunstone UK on the Facebook page, I think you'll still see it there. Brit Vengers. Or if you just need some advice about wrestling with your conscience about whether it's the right thing to do, I recommend that you post there, and you can really get some thoughtful advice, so that you're really thinking about it from all angles. We got you, America. We got you, down Australia, New Zealand, we got you. We got your back, world.
Down. What was that?
I'm like, down under. What is the continent? I can't even. Right, please understand that I cannot do geography. It is so bad. It's so bad. If I have to explain how to go to Glasgow, it would be over. And that is literally the best I can do. People, I know it's really bad.
That way, I should say.
I don't believe that. I think it's about 10 minutes over there. I can kind of see it from my window. Seriously, are you saying right? No, we're not getting into this. We're not, because I'll never get it. I accept it. Anyway, Scotland's Biggest Families aired this week. It's the first in a 3-part documentary series, and
I think it's going to get better.
I think so, because you know, it seems like maybe a kind of niche thing that I'm talking about in the show, except it's one of the first times that we got to see Mormonism spoken about pre-Watershed, and not in it's made the news or what do you make of this bunch of weirdos thing. It was apparently this family are the biggest family in the whole of Scotland, and it so happens they were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so they are talking about that as they are sharing their family's journey and what it's like to be a member of their family. So along with looking at tithing receipts and talking about how they feel about how they've moved away from church, oh my goodness, can I just talk about my favorite moments? I need to, someone in the note needs to put a link up to where you can actually see this clip, because can you guys tell me, did you love the nacho table as much as I
the
loved the nacho
table
table?
was amazing.
Oh my goodness. So this is a
We need
huge,
a
huge
nacho
family.
table.
They lay out this you know, a huge roll of what is it, like baking paper, like
Possibly,
greaseproof
yeah.
paper. I'm trying to think of what our audience would call it. I would call it greaseproof paper. They lay it out on the table. It's all, you know, properly taped down. It's all, you know, super clean. And they just like put all the tortilla chips and then all of the toppings right there. It's just a whole table of freaking nacho, and they're all just digging in, and it looks like the most fun thing ever. So that.
But I want to know where the idea came from.
Where did that
I
come
need
from?
to know, how
You
did you come up
geniuses.
with that?
All right.
Yes.
I claim it in
So
the name
come
of
on, Emma.
Mormonism.
Come on, Emma. Spill.
So here is the star of the show for me was this wonderful youngest child, Meg, who was just so entertaining. The children were all absolute delights and were wonderful. But so this was a really, really fun watch. I mean, it was laugh out loud. These kids are great. But my hope was that we're going to see talking about leaving Mormonism in a healthy way. I feel like so far, episode 1, I feel like I'm getting my wish, because that's something that, you know, they look really happy, well, as much as you can tell, it's like there's cameras in your face. What you're supposed to look like, right? What were your thoughts on how so far leaving Mormonism is being portrayed?
Do you know they're getting on with life, aren't they? They're getting on with a happy, positive life. They're getting on with good family relationships. They're celebrating Christmas and having fun. They're doing all the normal fun things that families do, seeing their kids grow up, leave home, mature, welcome grandchildren. They're getting on with life. They're not walking around with raging anger and bitterness and tears and, you know, I'm not saying those emotions haven't been there,
Yeah,
but
I was going to say,
those,
I think the part that got me the most was, you know, when Mr. Han, shall we say? No, I'm being polite.
Daddy Han.
Daddy Han.
Oh, I only know Meg is the only name. Megan Posey.
When he's walking down, you know, talking about his walk to work and how it just hit him like that. Really, I felt the pain of that, even though they've moved on. But I think just re-talking that, reliving that must have been difficult. You know, to just be walking to work and have that realization. I don't believe this anymore. You know, and I felt the kind of almost pain of that, you know.
I agree.
Although they've talked about it and they seem, you know, happy now and they've moved on, but I think going back to that moment of that was hard. That must have been a hard moment for him, though. You know.
Yeah, when I heard that bit, Alana, when I heard that bit and heard him say that about this just isn't true. I don't believe this. And then he had to go and work a whole night shift as a nurse, a senior nurse, in a very responsible job. I thought, how did you ever pull it together enough to be able to cope with working and functioning and getting on with life? Because we kind of know what those dark nights of the soul are like when it's suddenly something hits you and you're like, really?
Sarah, well, I love that point. Sorry, Alana, you go.
It's fine. I was just saying, you've got to remember as well that this was just Daddy Han at the time. You know, his wife followed a few years later.
That's a good point. That's
so he's
a really
going that
good
journey
point.
on his own for that time.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's
it's
a really
funny,
good point.
and again, I can relate to that because that was me in my younger days. I've been in and out of the church. At one point, my family left and I was the only one going. And I've also been at that where I've left and the majority of my family, you know, and so it's not an easy thing to go through.
I hadn't even thought until you mentioned, Sarah, because what I saw in that moment was you're seeing the sort of true life version of, you know, Andrew Garfield's character Jeb. You're seeing okay, that where we leave him in the show, where he's starting to you know, this discovery where he's there, he's in faith crisis now, and he's handling it very, very well, and he's emotional and he's having these responses and he's looking at church history now. And then we're sort of looking at Daddy Han, and we're seeing how that all what that looks like in real life, it's not something that I've really thought about. He has to continue living life while having what in a different, if it wasn't about faith, you would be sort of saying, this is a mental health crisis. Actually, sometimes it is a mental health crisis. And let me just also shout out today, because we have
it can.
We have a wonderful milestone for a friend of the podcast, David Shepherd, graduated. It was his official graduation today. And for those of you who haven't met his work yet, he is, you can find him on Facebook. He is a therapist who has a lot of experience in this area. He posted a beautifully vulnerable post today about how coincidentally he graduated on the same day as 8 years ago. He was checking himself into a mental health facility, into hospital as a he just completely broke in faith crisis. And today we see a wonderfully kind and thoughtful human being who is here and helping others to find their voices and to heal from trauma. We really want to amplify his work. Thank you, David, for all that you do, and you are a wonderful human being. We all just love you so much, and we will put a link to his work. But this is my point. This is people's mental health. This is their lives. This is their family unit. I want to ask, were you ever worried your wife was going to leave? What fears did you have around that? Yeah,
there's scope for a lot more discussion around how people handle that.
Yeah, and which really is why we need these things on TV, so that we can talk.
And it absolutely is no exaggeration to call it a dark night of the soul, because until you've been in that position, it is almost impossible for anybody to understand that hasn't actually been in that position.
Yeah. And, and I think what is really valid to that is that people experience a dark night of the soul and can come to totally different conclusions. Yeah. I've had two. People are to have one is a massive life event. I've had two, and I've come to a different place. People who experience it, so often, well, this is how I managed to make it work. There is so much complexity in people's stories, and I guess that's why I'm sort of thinking about just carrying on your daily life while you're going through this ground shift. Now, Sarah, you mentioned how they're getting on with life. There are two things that I want to sort of talk about. What that looked like,
but they've had years of processing to get to where's what we're seeing, because it's like when somebody goes through extreme pain and crisis, and you see them years later as a quite together, well-balanced person. You're not seeing what's gone into getting there.
Yeah. Well, how about if your home is directly across the road from a church building?
Yeah.
Oh my.
Horrible.
That must be so traumatic.
Every day of your life, it would be trauma reawakened, wouldn't it? Every single day.
Yeah. Just for those of you who don't know, I don't know. This family portrayed they're in Dundee, which I only just learned how to point to on a map. Thank you so much for those who had the patience with me to explain it. So, I only know local Mormons. I probably know more Mormons in America than I do in my neighboring state, right? And the whole of another country than, however, I've been up to, hey, shout out Dundee Bingham Ward. I came up to visit you. There's some really nice people. Dundee, great job. Your ward meeting house looked lovely. The grass looked very neat, and I haven't been to where they are specifically. So this is no reflection on on the church or its people. But oh my goodness, how traumatic to leave a faith and have to live right across the road.
Look out your window and see that every day. See people coming and going. wondering what people are thinking, you know.
Well, do you know?
But do you know what would really hit home hard as well? Seeing all those people coming and going all the time, but how many of them ever cross the road to say, "Hey, how you guys doing?
Well,
This is hard. How are you guys doing?"
Yeah, it was something similar. I was thinking, because let's face it, it's not always appropriate to do that. You know, Alana, you are in a different place. No, with me, yeah, hell yeah, come visit. I'm waiting.
One thing that struck me in Banner, really struck me in Banner, was looking at the crisis that Jeb was going through, and realizing, and I know I've been there, and that's how I can talk to, I've been there, where actually somebody not remotely connected with the church has been the greatest possible support, and non-member, non-religious, completely. And it was, for me, it was a very, very close friend of mine who hasn't got the time of day for any form of religion ever. But he's one of my closest friends, and he was absolutely there for me every step of the way.
I hear you, and just as commonly, I would say, the ex-Mormon community are so thoughtful and kind. Because they know what it does, they know what you're going through, and you know that there's
100%.
You very rarely
100%.
you do get people who are sort of saying, I have no idea why you're doing this to yourself. You know, remember, you know, draw boundaries. You don't have to do this to yourself. But you know, they know what you're going through. But what I'm thinking
really
about is that meeting house, and it could be any meeting house. I'm specifically talking about the one in Dundee, I guess, because we're in a specific situation. But I think about, you know, when I'm at church and I feel the absence of the people that I would have been best friends with, who I am best friends with, who are no longer there. So, you know, not just Alana, you know, all of those people that are part of my story, that are part of me. What would that do to look across the road and you're right there, and do you know that I still love you? You know what? I trust that, Dundee, that you're awesome people, and that you're making your love known, because it's, you know, it must be tough for you guys to watch people that you really love and care about
leave.
Yeah. So, you know, what a great opportunity. And then, so it's talking about how the family have local businesses. And I guess I'm just saying, you know, whenever people leave Mormonism, they're leaving behind a whole community. Actually, there are other ways to support in communities. And yeah, I would love for that to have a, you know, a happy aspect to it. I'm really thankful that certainly the experiences I have, like I'm able to be in really close contact with my best friends who've moved on, and I'll still miss you. But it's church is better when everyone's there, but it is not a healthy place for everyone, and that has to be okay. That has to be okay. Okay, getting on with life. So you mentioned that they're getting on with life. Well, yeah, so from what I can see, but this is the little sneaky peek of what we're going to see. We're going to see Sunstone. So I think we mentioned this on Sunday.
Can't wait.
Last year, when Alana and I and Sarah, where we met for the first time. Oh, it's like when our trio was born. All of the Brit Vengers met for the first time too. It was a pretty huge time, but there was a cameraman who was an absolute delight. We all fell in love with him, and I wasn't really around. I was busy, I don't know, schmoozing. I don't know, whatever. Probably taking a nap, Alana, if I had to guess. You were in the room with where the hands were doing something. They were doing a presentation. So I think we're going to get to see a little bit of that. You'd said that you enjoyed it. We're going to get to see a little bit more of that. Now, my question for you guys, that I guess we're going to be revisiting next week after we watch this show, is that getting on with life? You leave Mormonism, and then you're involved in things like, maybe you'll go to Sunstone, or for those people who go to Thrive, or you're online in post-Mormon communities, or whatever that could look like. Do you mind if we talk about that? Is that getting on with life?
I think there's an element of it where, yeah, for that time, because I think when you just kind of leave the church, I know obviously for certain people, you know, it's maybe still 8-9 years. I don't know that I could live in that space forever. And saying that, it's me we're talking about. I probably would still go just for the social aspect of it. I might not be as involved with the little, what they called,
like the presentations and workshops.
But I think there's still an element of it where, and obviously with Sunstone it's a little bit different because it's not all just direct with the Mormonism that I grew up with. There's aspects of, you know, Community of Christ. There's obviously those little workshops where, you know, life parenting after Mormonism, you know, how do you speak to your kids about leaving the church, all these little different things. So there's certain parts of it that you can be okay with. But I think it's just living in that space for as long as you need to. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because especially for people like myself and, you know, the Hands, it's been your whole life. You know, what do you do after you leave that space? Where else do you have to turn? Because when you leave the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there's nothing. There's nothing, you know, there's no aftercare, there's no helping you through that difficult time. So you've got to turn somewhere, because like I always come back to, if people think it's bloody easy having a faith crisis, then they're so wrong, and they need to wake up to that. And that's where I feel members need to wake up, that it's not just as easy as just walking away from the church. It destroys people. It helps, you know, they lose that identity, that community. Who am I now? Who am I? Because this has been my life. This has been who I am. There's so much to figure out. So I think part of that for me is just that little bit of aftercare, kind of still get the little bit of spirituality if you so need it. Again, it's that choice of what works for you. For some people, Sunstone works for them. Some people that doesn't. Sometimes it needs to be Thrive, because it's a more casual, just get together. You know, it's just, I guess it's figuring out what's right for you in that moment. It's not right for everyone. But
Sarah,
if it works for you, then it is moving on, I guess.
I love that, Alana. There's actually a lot of quotable things in that, and it's really valuable. Sarah, could I ask now? Unfortunately, what we do, sometimes people might get offended if we're talking about things, especially as, you know, the Han family, you know, you are real human people with real human experiences. So if I can only apologize if this causes any offense to anyone, but, you know, we're going to call it as we say. If I felt like this was unhealthy in any way, I would probably be saying, you know, and I think we need to talk about that. So, Sarah, your experience of, you know, seeing the post-Mormon parenting, we're seeing a couple who've transitioned away from Mormonism, who are going to Sunstone. I guess maybe I'm asking for a sneaky peek. Did you see? Was there a part of you that was like, you know, this is a bit unhealthy? Because I'll be honest, that's not what I get from this series at all.
I didn't get. I didn't get the sense that for that family where they're at this moment in time and their journey has been unhealthy at all. I know there's been phenomenal pain and phenomenal difficulties, but I think they're a family that have been able to have enough insight and understanding as to what they need as individuals and as a family, and to be able to move forward and take the good from the best places they can find it to move forward as a family and individually with their journey. I think we see a whole range of stuff, don't we, in the post.
We do. We're losing Sarah a little. We're losing you, Sarah, just a little, a tiny touch. So just
let me take a walk to the other end of the room, because
no worries. While you do that, that's fine, Sarah. Just if you take a wee second, and hopefully we'll be back with you. But yeah, I feel like that's what makes the documentary so compelling, because I don't think anybody's tuning in necessarily to watch Mormonism. They're tuning in to say, oh, Scotland's biggest families, how's this going to go? And the Mormonism part is incidental. And so we're watching this really big family thinking, oh, you know, how are you going to manage all of these really difficult things? How are you going to manage the kids? And, oh, that's really interesting. That seems really healthy, normal family dynamics and fun and exhausting. I apply that actually to, you know, so the Mormonism aspect is very similar. Like, oh, this is really interesting. It's something very new to most people. Most people in Scotland aren't Mormon and don't know what that looks like. And they're talking about something that's a little bit complicated and what moving away from that looks like. So as they're discovering new things about their life, and it's just what I think makes the documentary very compelling. So sorry, please continue. I think we've got you now.
I think most people who don't know the Mormon world would not understand the implications of somebody who's been an absolute true believing all-in Mormon leaving the Mormon world. I think people don't truly understand that unless they've been in that position, because to leave a very high demand authoritarian religion that's all encompassing and to move away from that is very difficult. And I think people wouldn't necessarily have seen that in looking at that bit of the documentary. There was,
yeah.
I mean, I missed the first 20 minutes of it because until I got some instructions from PD, I couldn't get on at all. So I missed the first 25 minutes of it. We do, we love you.
Yeah, FBI. If you're coming for anyone, come for PD.
Because we'll stick up for you, PD.
Yeah, because we're fine. We just claimed everything. Did anybody catch why?
I joined the point at which Roy was holding up tithing receipts and kind of saying, look how much tithing he'd paid over kind of 1 year and a couple of years. That was the point at which I joined the programs, probably halfway through. And I think for a lot of people, people would have probably thought, you gave that much money to the church in a year. And that might have kind of baffled some people as to why would you give, when you've got 13 kids and you're a nurse, why would you give your church £10,000 in a year, not realising that that's what you do.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's shown in the show, because it is such a, you know, why would you? I don't think, you know, well, they don't run around Sunstone holding up the tithing receipts for, you know, for all that I could see. But did anybody know, like, what was the reason that Mother Han had mentioned that was behind her reason for leaving? Did anybody catch what that was? Alana, do you remember?
I'll probably know it as soon as you say it.
Remember.
LGBTQ.
That's right.
Oh yeah, that the 2015 policy of exclusion.
And do you know? And this is me speaking as a active Mormon. Do you know what I thought? I thought, you know, that is integrity. That's if that's the reason why you've left. I commend your integrity.
Do you know, 100%. So many people left over that policy of exclusion. Because it's one of the most hateful things that has ever been seen, isn't it? Yeah. And many people left.
I'm so sorry that happened. And I wish it wasn't so. I'm not advocating, you know, for that to be a choice. But when I also think, you know, it's a good day to mention, you know, a good day. It's a timely day to have this discussion, you know, when we're talking about this.
We're coming up to the anniversary of it.
Well, yeah, we are.
So much trauma and pain is going to be reawakened for people.
Yeah. Last night on social media, David Archuleta shared the fact that he is now taking the decision to join Alana Wilson-Bryce and taking a step back. I love that. I love that phrasing, just taking a step back from the church. And you know, so it's with a heavy heart that, you know, we hear that news, but oh my goodness, we absolutely bless your journey, David, and that, you know, it must be so painful. And I'm so sorry that the church that you love has brought you to this really wrenching decision.
There is nothing. I mean, we are so close to the time when all the pain, the absolute pain that policy of exclusion has caused for so many people, and we're just right there on top of it, aren't we, at the moment?
And that's the thing, by changing it back, it doesn't take away the pain that people went through in their lives that were lost because of that.
Do you know, well, one of the things that came out to me strongly when we were thinking about fundamentalism and I was watching Banner, one of the things that came out to me strongly was the absolute danger of a church that doesn't apologise and doesn't strongly disavow and repent of actions and harm that they have caused.
Absolutely.
And we've seen this over and over again with the church. They have never repented of the racism and the harm that's caused as an institution, and they've never truly disavowed and dealt with it upfront and honestly. We've seen it with the November 2015 policy of exclusion. They suddenly turned around and had a revelation, didn't they, that suddenly got rid of it all and suddenly decided it was a policy, not a revelation, or whatever. Can I swear? We don't swear on this program, do we?
I think if you're having a strong feeling, then I'd rather not filter you. Yeah, you use your voice.
The only explanation word that you can ever give to describe this whole policy of exclusion and the nonsense the church made of it and the harm that the church had caused is nothing short of fuckwittery. What else is it? It is fuckwittery.
And the timestamp for that for when I make the
209.
209. See this on TikTok just shortly. Well, yeah,
but you know, that's okay. That's probably not what we should be going around saying. But there is no other label that comes to my mind other than that one to describe what this policy of exclusion. And the church have never spoken out clearly and strongly enough to say, we are so sorry, we got that wrong.
Yeah.
We made an attempt at putting it right when we realised how much harm we caused in the 3 years of that policy. We tried to put it right, and we really want you to forgive us for getting it as wrong as we got it.
Wrong, but then that calls into question revelation, doesn't it?
And we're
that's why they won't say it, isn't it? And that's why they can't say it, isn't it? And this is right back to why we have fundamentalism, because the church cannot apologise and say, "Oh no, that's wrong. That is, we don't do that." They cannot. They need to get their prideful heads out of the clouds and come back down to earth.
I'm going to come to you both in a second for any closing thoughts. So this is Alana's, couple of minute warning, just because she always looks like a bunny in the headlights and freaks out every time I say, "Hey, closing thoughts." I'm literally surprised.
Always being the bunny in the headlights.
And you're still allowed to say there is no thought in this mind at the moment. But I want to I want to use that as my closing thought, actually, because I just think it is so important that when, we see the Hand family and the documentary, we see radicalization, we see fundamentalism, and we see these policies or practices that we can't even talk about or acknowledge have ever existed, even if they were not officially formally adopted as practices by the church. If you do not do that, what you get is some little guy on the internet who thinks he's doing God's good work, and he's going to start off by taking pops at church leaders from I don't know, if Community of Christ were a Disney character, it would be maybe Bambi holding a sign up at a protest while hugging the Bambi's gay cousin. I don't know. They're bloody the most loving, gentle, lovely, sweet people that you've ever met. And you're seeing the most sinister motives, and all of this all this horrible stuff. You get a guy behind a computer keyboard, or who's a little bit of authority over someone and turns sister missionaries into his personal harem, who ends up manipulating people, decides that actually having really studied the scriptures and really taken a good deep dive into the Journal of Discourses, or this, really going deep, that actually polygamy was a thing, that blood atonement was a thing, and that's something that if we follow the roots of what Joseph Smith taught, that's what we need in today's world, as it's going further and further away from the church.
Well, we've got Desnet in Utah, in America,
exactly, and it's as you see, as the church makes it more about the church against the world. We need to retrench. We need to get back to our roots. We need to look at what's in the scriptures, and so that involves, that we're a restoring church. So we're restoring all of these ancient practices, and people feel so strongly about all of this stuff. It is your whole world view. It is the rock upon which you have built your entire life. And if you need to firm up that foundation, and it's based on a foundation where we have blood atonement, we have polygamy, we have messiness, we have lying for the Lord, all of this really uncomfortable stuff that gets redacted out of church history in case anybody bloody goes and does it. It's really, really complicated, messy stuff.
Well,
that if we don't say this is not acceptable behavior, and the church, repudiates this completely, and here is why, and here's what we need to do to fix it, then we end up with this: people who have to leave, or people who become radicalized, people who, or people who stay in this unhealthy space of, what do we do now? Anyway, Sarah, what you thinking as we come to you for closing thoughts?
I don't know that I've got any mind-blowing closing thoughts at this moment in time. The fact that I'm trying to get to grips with the fact that I've just described what I think in the terms that I use to describe what I think about the policy of exclusion. There is no other word for it.
You can see it again.
It's fuckery. There is no other word for it.
Oh, I love you.
And
this is why Sarah
I love your description that Community of Christ are like Bambi holding a poster at a protest, and we're out there with machine guns killing people. And didn't Peter Bleakley summed it up similarly brilliantly in his presentation at Sunstone in September 2021, when he said, Community of Christ are like the Belgians and we're like the North Koreans.
Oh, a good-hearted, funny,
and we do love
people.
you, Community of Christ. We do love you. That's why we can say this, because we
our friends. It's a compliment.
It is a compliment, and we can say that because you guys do more to help us guys than you will ever know. So we can say that.
I feel like I could probably come up with a better Disney parallel. But anyway, any final notes that you want to give, Sarah?
No,
okay.
I don't think so. I've got to be honest.
Yeah, you're all good. We'll be back with more to discuss anyway. So, Alana Wilson-Bryce.
Alana Wilson-Bryce is out the game. I do apologise if I've looked really spaced out the last while, but I'm actually in quite a lot of pain just with sitting. I have fibromyalgia, so I take this weather. I don't know what it's like where you are, but it's cold, it's pouring a rain. This doesn't help my pain levels. So I'm just in a zone right now and thinking about getting into my bed. So that's my closing comments.
Our girls' laptop broke this week. Our girls' fibro is flaring up. She thinks she's possibly coming down with a little bug. She's been feeling a bit poorly.
And see, the other thing I'm throwing there,
no.
Because I was trying to work out between my iPad and my phone what I was using, I thought my iPad was on charge this whole time, but no, it's my phone. So I'm currently sitting at 5% battery, stressing, are we finishing? Because my iPad's going to cut out.
Let's live life on the edge, right? Let's see how we can eke out an ending to watch Alana's face turn to horror, right? This is going to be Alana's, for Halloween, you're all watching your horror movies and the blood pressure's going up and the adrenaline. This is Alana's moment.
Yeah.
Okay. What do I need to tell you about? Okay, do not leave, because I need to, again, say thank you and please donate. Also, I need to tell you, please go to the website.
Donate.
Yes.
Donate, Jane. I had a message came through on my personal messenger a few moments ago from somebody who said they were trying to make a donation and the button wasn't working.
Oh, you're so lovely. Thank you so much. If you go to our website, the button is on there and we will repost it on social media all over the place. And in actual fact, I think I can stick it in the chat again right now. It's always in the show notes. Now, here is what we're going to be doing in a couple of weeks. Next Wednesday, right here, we've got the Brit Vengers. We're assembling, and we haven't had all of the Brit Vengers on the screen before in 21st Century Saints. We've always gone to them. This time, we have some things we want to talk about with them. So we're going to have the whole gang here. We're excited to have you with us. And then the following week, now I know that this is reversed and I'm really sorry that it is not perfect, but this is a fantastic book. We're going to be speaking with the author. This is going to let you get your homework done in advance. We've got Charles Lawson, who we got to meet at Sunstone, and he has written this book, which has rave reviews from everybody who has read it, who's been chatting with me at Sunstone. The Millennial Shot. It's available. I believe it's on Amazon and all of those good places.
It is on Amazon.
It is. So we're going to chat with him. So if you want to get ahead of the discussion, if you have any, he's a really nice guy. We're going to speak with him right here. So if you need any help, if you have anything you would like to ask him about his book, The Millennial Shot, A Spiritual Inoculation for the Modern Latter-day Saint. He is a really good man. He was in the same ward as me for many years. He's a really good man. Do you know, I can't wait till we get someone to interview who's a complete git, just so that we'll be able to see. Because we only ever interview people who are really, really nice. And I just feel
I'm sure we could come up with something.
Do you think?
So my question is, are you that git?
Is it me? Am I the drama?
No,
is anybody going to volunteer? Is anybody going to volunteer to say, I am the git? Yeah. If you are, pop your name in the box, pop your name in the notes, and we'll get back to you. If you want to claim that title.
I was really enjoying thinking that I was going to be the git for a moment.
No. So, well, no. I was thinking.
No, you can't be. No, you're not allowed to be.
Well, because sometimes you want, being the pantomime villain is fun. Speaking of pantomimes, do you notice how I did that amazing segue? It's like we wrote this stuff. We are just about to start rehearsals with Priesthood Dispatches for his annual Christmas pantomime. If you are in the rest of the world and you're not from the UK, you might never have experienced panto. Well, the Brit Avengers are bringing it to you. We're going to be performing.
Pantomime is phenomenal.
It is so good. You're going to have such fun. You're going to see possibly some well-loved characters in drag.
Pantomime is the best.
It's going to be so fun. So that's all to come soon. For those of you who are concerned about Nemo the Mormon, he is okay. We promise. He is home. He has he's recovered from his little stint in the ER in America.
Yeah.
Will you all please remember, he's only little. He's from Britain. He's from England and he's only little. So it was breathing in and out sometimes is just tough. But you know, he's fine. So he's all good. And we should have everyone with us next week. So we have so many great things in store for you. Thank you for all the love. And please don't forget to like, to subscribe. If you need to get in touch, send us a message and we'll see you all next week. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Night, everyone. Sleep well, everyone.